Welcome to the Making It podcast. I'm your host, Kyler Miles, and on this show, we interview guests about their journey of making their dreams a reality. Welcome to the Making It podcast, where I talk about people's stories of them in the process of making their dreams a reality. As cheesy as it may sound, I laugh every time I say it, but it's the truth. And I have with me Armando Cruz. He is a speaker, best-selling author, leader, entrepreneur, and you're calling from Miami, Florida. Is that right?
That's correct.
Beautiful, sunny Miami, Florida. I wish I was there, just so I can get some sun, because Montreal is still very cold. We're maybe like 5 degrees, so it's getting warmer. But how are you doing, man? How's the quarantine life?
The quarantine life is as expected. I will say it's got its challenges. It's opened up some fascinating opportunities. And but I would say the biggest thing that we're juggling right now is having 3 kids at home, plus running 2 businesses and trying to figure all that out.
I have a 10-year-old and already homeschooling her is tough between my girlfriend and I. It's like 3 kids and 2 businesses. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, well, I guess you figure it out.
Exactly, right? Awesome. Well, what I try to do on this podcast is, like I said in the intro, is really just talk about people's stories. And this began, the podcast journey with me talking to people about my creative process, my creative journey, coming from a 9-to-5 kind of desk job as a salesman, and finding my passion in videography and filmmaking and kind of creating content. And been sharing that story. And now that we're quarantined, I'm reaching out to different people like yourself and trying to understand other people's stories. And there's lots of ups and downs and challenges that I feel a lot of people face. And sharing these stories can be very helpful in how they came and I guess the steps they took to make their dream a reality. And so, I'd love to hear more about your story and maybe give us a little introduction of yourself and start us off there.
Sure. Thank you first of all, thank you for having me. I'm glad we could do this. It's one of the beauties of technology. Mm-hmm. Though I think by the end of this quarantine, there's going to be a lot of people that want to throw Zoom out the door and out the window, but it's still a wonderful medium to connect. I mean, you're in, you said Vancouver or Montreal?
Originally from Vancouver, BC, moved to Montreal last year for my family, and but in Canada it's cold, but it's
cold. Warm. Got it. Cold. All the way opposite end, sunny South Florida, and we can have these conversations. So again, thank you for having me and hosting me.
Anytime,
brother. Let's see, a little bit of background. I like to say I'm a connoisseur of experiences. To me, experiences, I use it in the frame of reference of adventures. They create currency for success for me. And the more experiences, more adventures that I can do both with myself, but with my family, especially with my kids, I feel like that adds another dimension as to the impact that I can have on their life, the legacy. And I've been married it's going to be 14 years this year in December.
Congrats.
3 kids. Thank you. I have 3 kids. My wife and I run 2 businesses. And we've been doing that so we're going to be married for 14. We've been doing it for 13, I think it is. 13.
Oh, wow.
So we've been doing it together for 13. Mm-hmm. And then you said at the beginning that it sounds or it feels kind of cheesy when you say like the process of making it. I think if you've been intentional about it, mm-hmm. and you're in a place where you're actively trying to create this, mm-hmm. it sounds less cheesy because it's your experience every day. Mm-hmm. And I bring that up because anyone listening to this, I imagine, has that as part of their radar, at the very least, just by listening to the show, that wait, there is a process.
Mm-hmm.
And that process isn't all sunshine and roses all the time. There
Nope.
are the ups and downs. And I like to say the ups and downs are equivalent to an EKG. You want ups and downs. That means
Yeah.
life. You do not want a flat line. That means
Yeah.
death.
That's true. That's true.
That's how you know you're heading in that way, right? So,
I like that analogy.
right. I don't know where you want to take this, but I mean, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
as far as a background, that's kind of where I'm at as far as a groundwork for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to know, you have this book. I was looking at the legacy code. And the thing that really stuck out to me was that is something that I only learned fairly recently in my 20s, that I want to do more than just live my life. I want to have a legacy for when I'm gone. You start thinking about your future. I have a family. I have a young 10-year-old, a stepdaughter, and I'm thinking about her future. And it's changing my mindset. It's changing what I care about. And I know a lot of people in my network are feeling that same way. When we're all in a similar age, so you reach a certain point where you start shifting gears and you focus less on I just want to have fun and go out, and more about building your life and having
Right.
meaningful and purpose. And so the legacy code, just in my quick little research, is that you're building a system or a process in place to leave something behind for the people you love. Whether that be Kyler will always put a smile on my face, could be as simple as that, or as big as you want to be, the mayor of your city, or you want to
Right.
leave like financial security for your family. Whatever that might be is for everyone to decide. But I'd love to understand more about how you came about writing this book. Why was this the topic of it, and what fueled you to make that? Because that's what I really connected with, and when I was looking and doing my research on you, and why I wanted you on the show. So
Sure.
yeah, we could maybe start there if that makes sense.
Okay. The genesis for the book actually stems back maybe 7 years ago. And have you ever felt in your life where you've gotten to a point where you say you're almost chasing something, you're trying to achieve all these things, these accolades,
Mm.
this ideal of this is success, this is what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get there, the feeling is that all there is? And that's kind of where I was at.
Mm.
And I felt trapped by the very thing that I created to make me successful, which was a really hard concept, because from the outside, it felt, I have a healthy family. My wife and I have been married for, at that time it wasn't 14, but
Mm-hmm.
let's say 7 years, 8 years. And I'm healthy. We have a thriving business that's helping people. My wife and I have a fitness and physical therapy studio and practice down here in South Florida, where we focus on people with chronic pain, helping to educate, helping them to understand and eliminate chronic pain.
Mm.
And we've been doing this, love our clients, but somehow I felt like there was something more.
Mm.
And I felt trapped by the current setup and the certain system that we had in the business. And I thought the problem was the business. I was like, I want to do something deeper, but I can't because of the business. And so I fell into this dark place to the point where I almost bankrupted the business. My wife is pregnant with our third child at the time. And I am pushing clients away. I'm coming home and sleeping, 4, 6 hours in the middle of the day. I have no desire to do anything. I just feel lost. I feel trapped. I feel overwhelmed, and I don't know what to do. And I remember the concern on my wife's face for obvious reasons, because things just kept getting worse and worse. I would isolate myself from my family. I had no desire to be around anyone. And I remember around that time, one of the coaches that I had worked with in the past reached out to me, and he invited me to a retreat in Thailand. But there were two problems with this. Problem number one was, like I said, I'm pretty much bankrupting the business because I've stopped everything. And so I can't afford it. And number two, the retreat finishes a week before the due date, which means this is the third. There's a good chance that I could miss the birth of my third born. And I remember coming to my wife and telling her about it, and she looked at me and said, do you think this can help? And I said, yeah, I really think that this could be really helpful for me. And I remember this moment like in slow motion, because to me, I describe it as a moment of immense courage and love that I've experienced from her. And I remember her saying, well, then you need to do it, not for you, but for us. She goes, because I would rather you miss that one day, the birth of our child, than miss the rest of our life because you're not the man, the husband, or the father I know you can be. Right? And that, when I heard that, was crushing because it was like a mirror saying, you are like letting everyone down. And it wasn't that she was trying to say, oh, you're letting us down, but it's because she saw the potential. She's like, this is not you, but I don't know how to help you anymore. And if you feel like this is it, it's worth it, even if it means missing the birth of our third child. So we figured it out. I flew to Thailand, which is a 24-hour endeavor from here. It's like door to door. By the time I got there, it was about 24 hours.
Wow.
And there I saw something really powerful that I had never really experienced. And it was the power of retreat. Now, we've heard of the word retreats many times, and we get, oh, this is what you do. You go on a retreat. But if you look in the dictionary about what a retreat is actually stepping away from your regular life to gain perspective. It's physically moving yourself from one location to another one. And just by the physical act and by doing certain things that allow you to reflect a little bit more, you have a completely different vantage point from before. It's kind of like if you looked at a cylinder from the side, it would look like a rectangle. If you looked at it from the top, it would look like a circle. But if you start looking all the way around, you can now see that it's a cylinder. It's neither one, but kind of a fusion of it. And I felt like stepping away provided the different angles to look at my life at that moment, gave me the clarity to realize that, number one, there was nothing wrong with the business. It was very fulfilling. It was the stuff that I wanted to be doing. And then on top of that, I realized that there was something more that I wanted to do, which is I wanted to help men just like me, married men that are family-centric, that are entrepreneurs, that want to show up powerfully in their marriage, in their health, in their business, with a family-centric, not profit-centric, decision-making mode of operation, right? Because there are plenty of men that are successful, if you want to call it that it's like, okay, if it means making even more money, right? There's a point where like you got everything covered. Anything more really is at that point, it's ego at the end of the day, right? Because if you've got all your needs met, then more is not going to necessarily make everything better. But those moments that you miss, you never get those back, right? So those were the kinds of conversations that I wanted to be having with other men just like me. And I realized there's a process to minimize a lot of this disconnect that we see amongst married entrepreneurs that have higher divorce rates, have that higher disconnect with their health in many cases. They have estranged relationships with their family because they become so obsessed with the entrepreneurial aspect that they leave the other stuff behind, right? So I realized that I wanted to help married men just like myself. And so I created the program that I wish I would have had that walked them through the cornerstone, the foundations to be able to build from the things that matter most, like values and beliefs, and building up to how do you set up your life so that you reinforce the things that matter most. And so that program is called the Rich Man Experience. And, we always talk about, people talk about rich as money, but rich really was redefined as a value system, as a compass sort of to guide you along the way. And so it stands for respected, inspired, connected, and happy. And so that was the redefinition of rich. And what I realized is that when I came back, I was able to now start reaching out to these kind of men and start serving them in a different capacity. I came back, and 3 days later, the baby was born. So I didn't miss the birth, which was great.
That's good.
And then I had been doing that work for a couple of years. And I decided, you know what? The work that we're doing in here, that process, I'd like to be able to share it with more people that perhaps, number one, can't afford coaching. Number two, they're not ready for it emotionally at that moment, because there is a commitment to it. And if you're not willing to commit to it, then at the very least have exposure to it. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to write this book as if I am writing this out to my family, to my clients at that point. And actually, on a deeper level, probably to my son, right? My oldest, because he was obviously the oldest and one I had interacted the most with, specifically to him as a man, so that if something were to happen to me, here's a guide to what it could mean to living your life purposely and creating that intentional legacy.
Wow. That's such a cool story. And I find that relates to so many different people in many ways. Like when you're speaking about those challenges, like I was thinking about how moving from Vancouver for myself to Montreal, people kind of looked at me funny, like, why would you do this? And what I wanted for myself was beyond what people perceived me as, because when I was growing up, a lot of times you grow up as, if you make a mistake in school or whatever, and people laugh, oh, I better not do that. I want to be liked. I want to be looked upon. And so you then grow up and go through life that way, like, okay, I have to get this job so that I get a good pay and that I look good in front of others. And then what you were talking about was that you had that conversation with your wife about that, like being a real man and doing what you need to do for what's important to you, which was your family and your business, and ended up benefiting you so well. And I love that you did what you wanted to do, and you've discovered a way to help not only yourself but other people find their way. And I find that just so interesting, especially as a young man. I'm not married yet, but one day soon, maybe after this coronavirus. Look forward to having those conversations. And I love the relationship you have with your wife. That's a hard conversation to have.
Right.
I know my girlfriend and I have been trying to have this open communication and be more, really get in depth into our emotions, because I grew up not expressing any emotion. I had to be tough, can't cry, got to be a tough guy. So I love that you dig deep into that.
Right. And like I said, we're going to be married for 14 years, and there's been a lot of bumps in the road. Like a big part of it is not the bumps in the road come with the lack of clarity as to how to properly communicate. And over the past 14 years, we've been intentional about learning how to master that communication for each other. Like she knows what I need more, I know what she needs more. And so we try to align ourselves with that the best that we can. It doesn't always work. And, there's conflict. And then we're like, oh, okay, that's why there's conflict. Let's reassess. And so we've both been very willing to explore that, because for us it was like, no, marriage is for life. So either we figure this out, or we're going to keep bashing our head against the wall, because
100%.
you know.
Yeah.
So and I think that, like with anything, when you have a commitment to figuring something out, it makes a big difference. And it's not easy. Relationships are not easy, because
nope.
it's a very, like, you're dependent on someone else that you don't have control over, right? Because it's not just you. I hear a lot of the loud voices, especially in the entrepreneurial space, that number one, they're single. It's a different world. If you're single, you can do things quite different than if you're married or if you have kids. Because if you're married or you have kids, your life is not just your life anymore. You have responsibilities. You've made a choice to be in a relationship with someone. So just because you want to do something doesn't mean you just get to do it, because it affects other people.
Yeah.
You have kids. You know, I would take completely different risk if I was single and I didn't have kids, if I wasn't married, because I could live in a tent if I lost it all.
Yeah, it's true.
You know,
100%.
And we, by the way, we love camping. But one thing is, we're going camping. The other one is, no, this is our situation. This is how we're living. I don't want to. That's not where I want to put my family. Right? There's a big difference. Honor the stage of life that you're in. You mentioned at the beginning, in your 20s, that you were interested in more partying and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's fine. When I wrote the book, I interviewed 150, I think it was 153 guys from different areas of their life. And what I found was the men that thought about legacy the most were fathers first. Second, in that group of people that thought about it, were people who were, let's call it, religious, that believed in something greater than themselves, God, like a higher power, right? So the world didn't revolve around them. There was something greater. So, I have to step up my game in order to step up to that. The ones that thought about it the least were like the college students, because number one, they had perceived invincibility and time on their side. And at that point, the world revolved around them, because they could only see right there.
Yeah.
And I don't share that because one is better or worse. It's just, it's a different stage. So, and that's one of the things that I see often is I get invited into these shows, and sometimes, I mean, I've gone on 2 or 3 podcasts of high school students, and I'm like, dude, that's so awesome. But I see them trying to be like 40-year-olds. I'm like, wait. You're not 40. Be 18, be 16. It's okay. Like, each stage of your life has a wealth of knowledge that is going to bring you when you're 40. But if you start acting like you're 40 when you're 16, you're going to miss a lot, and you're going to have gaping holes because you're acting like a 40-year-old when you're 16.
Yeah. I think it comes to, like, I'm learning a lot about myself in these last couple, like, years. Like, I'm a new father. Like, I'm a stepfather. So I came in, she's 10 years old and very new. I love kids. I have a little sister, and we have a big age apart. So I kind of feel like I was a big part of her life growing up. And I always gravitated with kids and volunteer, what have you. So I had no problem with that. But yeah, it's true. Like, I think it's perspective. People don't have other people's perspective. When you've been married for 14 years, that's a perspective I don't know. That's a perspective now you're sharing, and now I can see, into that life and see into, okay, what is that like? And that's what I love about these podcasts. You get so many different perspectives, and you can learn from different people. And you're completely right. Like, me jumping into this, I have a new perspective in my life. I'm steering my direction in a different way because of the responsibilities, and also because I want that. Right. So I love that. Going back to what you're talking about, the process, whether you're single or not, do you have any tips or let's say go through that process for someone who may have been laid off? Because let's be honest, a lot of people during this time either are being laid off and not working and might be in that depression state that you were talking about, feeling down and not working, and we've all been there, right? Do you have any suggestions for men and women who are going through that process and either have that conversation with their loved ones or how to have that conversation with themselves?
Right.
I think that's a really good and useful topic to touch on as people, across the world may be feeling that, right? I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, no, you're definitely going to be seeing a lot more of this. It's still early. There's already some people experiencing the effects of this. I think it's still too early for it to go deep. I'm going to. Unfortunately, I see this getting worse before it gets better, long term. Yeah. So economically, there's going to be a lag. There's going to be a big lag, and you're gonna be faced with some really uncomfortable truths that you're. The difficulty of it is what's going to really suck. But if you consider, look, we don't have control of everything that happens in our life, but we can have control of the way we choose to view it, the way that we respond to it. One of my favorite books, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Have you read it or have you heard of it?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it, unfortunately, but it's funny. You're the second person to mention that book, so I better grab it.
Right. It's a fascinating book about this. I think he's a psychiatrist, Viktor Frankl, that was in the concentration camps, and he basically the fascinating part about it is that because he understood the psychology of what was happening, he could see the stages that the people would be going through, and he knew, hey, the people that were going to die soon because they've given up hope, they wouldn't make it, right? One of the things that he says, sometimes there'll be guys that in their mind said, oh, this will be over by Christmas, and then Christmas will come and go, and they really mentally hadn't prepared for that, and then not long after they would pass away and die because that was it, right? And so he kind of goes into this idea of searching for meaning in the environment that you're in. You don't always have control of that environment. Us being in North America, we tend to have a lot more control because we are afforded a lot more freedoms, so that there is so much for us to create, to be able to control. But you have something like this that affects everyone, right? What if you're finding yourself in a place where you're kind of in the darkness? One of the things that is often shared, which I think is a big mistake, and I think I know very often it comes from a good place, but a very unskilled place. And that is just do it. It's nice for a sneaker company. It's nice as a concept to get you moving. But when you're in the dark, when you're struggling, telling somebody just do it really offers no help. Because if they could just do it, they would have done it. Right? If you're suffering and you're really in a bad and dark place, if I say to you, hey, Tyler, just do it, man. Just get yourself out of it. Oh, crap. Don't you think I would have been doing that if I could? Like, I just don't know how. It's a very unskilled way of approaching it. What needs to happen is you need clarity, right? If you walked into a dark room and say, Tyler, just confidently stroll across that room, ain't gonna happen. Can't do it, right? You're gonna be hesitant. You're gonna be feeling around. You're gonna take small shuffling steps. just to make sure you don't smash into a wall, trip over something. You just don't want to get hurt, right? Take that same room and I turn on the lights as a cutter, walk across the room comfortably. You can see the obstacles. You can walk across the room confidently. The difference between the room hasn't changed. All that's changed is clarity. Same thing happens with us moving forward. Very often, if you're finding yourself in literally that darkness, we need to go through finding a little bit more clarity. And that can come through several different ways. Number one, is taking a step back and gaining more clarity on what it is that you want, right? Because you can't move in the proper direction if you don't even know where your destination is, right? When in the book, I go through 5 steps. The first one is vision, right? You have to see what the bigger picture is. You have to gain clarity. That may mean you need to borrow somebody else's light. What I mean by that is, imagine the sun and the moon. You know that the sun has its own light source and it lights up the day. The moon doesn't have a light source. It's a reflection off the sun. And so what we'll find is that sometimes we're the moon, sometimes we're the light. Sometimes we need somebody else's light to help shine the light in front of ourselves so we can see what needs to happen. Other times we're clear and we are the sun shining our light brightly, and we can also be that reflection for other people. Right? We play both of those roles. And it can, by the way, it can change in a split second. It's not like, oh, I'm good here, there's nothing that can knock me off. At the same time, just because you're in the darkness right now doesn't mean you're going to stay there. It just seems that way. It just seems that way, right? So we got to get clear on the vision of gain the clarity of the big picture. Then from there is, okay, well, what's my driver? What's my engine? What's that purpose? So the second stage is get clear on what's that thing that's going to drive me even when things get bad. So what are those things that really matter most to me that I'm not willing to sacrifice? A lot of times it's family. If you have a family, it's like, look, I can't let them down. I have to provide for them. I have to protect them. I have to, make sure that they're taken care of. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's the vision of something more. Maybe it's you're after initially an accolade of some sort. Maybe that's the thing that drives you for a bit, right? And it can be for specific things, different things, right? Like, sometimes people are like, oh, but this isn't, let's say, wholesome enough, right? Like, let's say, oh, I want to get, sometimes the people are like, oh, I know that I should get healthy for my family, but that just doesn't do it. But they're like, but I really want a 6-pack. Okay, great. Let the vanity of that drive you initially, and then let the health take over, right? So understanding, getting a clearer picture overall, having a purpose, that engine that drives you. Now we have to understand the process, right? So what's the blueprint? Reverse engineer, what are the steps that need to be taken to end up in that final destination, in that vision. And I say not final destination, at that initial destination, right? Because
your goal, what you want, right?
Right. I think who was it? I think it was Newton that said, if I've seen so far, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants, right? And if you've ever gone hiking, I mean, you're there in Canada. They've got gorgeous mountains, right? But if you've ever gone hiking up a mountain, initially what you see is, if you could even see the summit of the mountain, depending on where you are, you can only see so far. And maybe you clear the tree line and now you can see even further. Now you can see the summit. And then you get to the summit, and what used to be the summit, all of a sudden you look across and you have a panoramic view, and now you're like, wait, but there's something over there that's worth exploring, right? So I don't say final destination, but it's a destination that once you get there provides a different platform, a different perspective for you to view the world, to make a decision what your next move is, right? So, and I share that because sometimes what stops us from creating the vision is feeling like, is this the right vision or the wrong one? Don't worry about it. Get moving towards it. And on the way, if you need a course correct, you're free to do so. Nothing says that you can't. Right? So you have your vision, you have your purpose, you have your process, the steps that need to be in place. Now let's look at the taking action. Right? You need to have taken action or implement all of this, because you can set up everything that you want. But if you don't take action on it, nothing's going to move forward. Right?
Yeah.
So perhaps is enlisting the help of someone, as a coach, a trusted advisor, a mentor, a therapist, whatever it is, to help you get going and walk you along this path. Maybe you need some of their light to shine there so you gain a little bit more clarity. Don't be afraid of that. In fact, it's the fast track. You get to borrow somebody else's brain. Actually, you mind if I share a little some science behind this a little bit?
Heck yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. When you sit down and you ever written down New Year's resolutions?
Every year.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So think about when you sit down to write New Year's resolution. Are you in a dark place? Like, not physically in the room is dark, but like, are you in a bad place? Rarely.
Yeah, pretty much. At times, sure, but rarely, no.
Right. But to the point where you're really like suffering, that you're like, oh, I can barely find enough money to eat. I can, like that, you're really in a survival state. It doesn't happen that way, because if you're in a survival place, you can't see beyond survival. It's one of the reasons why nomadic people, they don't thrive to the same degree as people in community that build up societies. That's where a lot of innovation happens, because there's room for innovation, because you can start thriving and creating systems to support the community. Whereas if you're nomadic, it's like, it's just enough to sustain our life, and then you move on to the next place that is going to sustain your life. A lot of people work paycheck to paycheck. They live a nomadic life. So there's no room for them to think beyond that, because they're just worried about the next meal. They're worried about that. And you need to address that, because if you don't have that, if you don't provide for the bare minimum, then your brain can't think beyond that. And so there's three brains. We have three brains. Our most primary brain is what's called our reptilian brain. It's responsible for us, keeping us alive. Water, food, shelter, reproduction, right? You want to make sure that you pass down your genes. All of that stuff is at a very primal level. If you think about a snake, when a snake is born, it doesn't hang around with mom and cuddle with mom. It's like, no, snake is born and it's off on its own right from the beginning. It's already programmed that it needs to eat, breathe, sleep, find shelter, find safety. That's what it needs to do. Like, it's already programmed in there. That's what that brain allows us to do. It lets us know that these are the things that on the most minimal level matter most, because if we're not around, if we're dead, then we can't continue. Then going up in brain, a little bit more developed, a little bit newer than the reptilian brain, is what's called the mammalian brain. And if you think about a wolf or a fox, they live in tribes, in packs, right? Mammals are dependent on their mother specifically, or their family unit to survive. Like, if you have a human baby and you leave it out in the wild, baby's going to die, because the baby has no way of procuring food, shelter, staying safe. It's very vulnerable. For us, it's for quite a few years. For animals, ends up being a lot less, that time span. But for us, it's the 16 years before, 16, 18 years, 20 years, depending where it is, 30 years before they leave the nest, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of that brain, which is community. Remember that we are mammals,
Mhm.
and so we thrive in community. Are there people that are the lone wolves, so to speak? Sure. But
Mm.
as a species, we thrive with community. We thrive with other people. Now, from a primal perspective, if somebody in the group looks at you off or wants to get rid of you, that now triggers a more reptilian response. Like if you've ever been in a group and somebody looks at you weird and you're like, I don't know why, but I'm getting a little bit like, I don't trust that guy. Why? Because our brain is saying, wait, if we're in a group dynamic and that guy is able to convince everyone else that I don't belong in this, I'm now not safe because I don't have my tribe. I don't have that support of the crew. So that's designed to keep a family unit, a tribal unit. It's also designed to help with hierarchy. So understanding, oh, look, this guy's in charge, then this one, then this one, then this one, then this one. This is where I fall in the hierarchy of this.
Mm.
That's what that brain is. And then we have our human brain, our neocortex, which is where we can do all the adding, the creating, and even more importantly, self-actualization, which is the thinking forward, creating and looking at the vision. I
Mm.
bring this all up because if you're in such a dark place that you're in a reptilian brain, you don't have access to your human brain.
Mm.
You cannot create. Think about like if you've ever been in a really dark place,
Mhm.
it's not the time that you're creating your best work.
No.
You can't create, you can't think as clearly. You're just getting by.
Mhm.
So I share that because if you're listening to this and you find yourself in that dark place, one of the benefits of having somebody from the outside that you trust, whether it's a coach, a therapist, a colleague, a good friend that can guide you, is that you can borrow their human brain for a while so that it kind of moves you along.
Mm.
They can help you see what you cannot see right now because they have a light that you don't.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I love like the science behind that. And I never really understood that, but I when you made those analogies, it made sense. Like I've been in a place where, yeah, like not so much survival. Like I never had food in front of me, but in the context, yes, like you can't think beyond the next day. I find even like I was only living in that moment. How can I get through right now?
Right.
And you are 100%. You can't think about your 5-10 year plan. You're going to be thinking about that moment and moving all the way up to that creative brain. Like it's so cool, the science behind it, and it's hard for me to repeat it.
Yeah.
But I understand it. I understand what you mean about the three different brains and all their different priorities and how to get to that state. And I love, like, I was writing it down, the kind of processes that you've put in the book, the clarity, what's your big vision, the driver, what's going to make you actually like go out and do it, what's the process, so the steps you take to become XYZ, and the action, the execution.
Right.
And what do you think about, and I wrote this down, about accountability, discipline, like routines, because I love what you said, you could share someone else's vision. If you are within a company, that's what a company is. It's a shared vision throughout the company. You believe in that vision, and that's what gives you can have clarity with that vision. You can be driven for that, and have action. Where do you think, if you believe in this, accountability and discipline fall under these areas? Because at least from my personal experience, when I was tasting the waters and things I wanted to do for a living, I would just try. I tried dance, I tried sales, I tried different forms of like business, like project management and admins, and I've done that, and because I had no idea, and so the advice I was given is go out and try. And when I was out and doing these things, I had no real discipline, no real accountability to even accomplish some easy tasks. Do you think that falls in anywhere within your process, accountability and discipline and achieving these things?
100%. That's actually what I'm writing my second book on. It's
Perfect.
actually micro habits, really is what it is.
Yeah.
Um, so two things that kind of pop up. Number one, when you're trying to figure what you want, if you're finding difficulty with knowing what you want,
Mm-hmm.
start searching for what you don't want.
Hmm.
In other words, you don't know what it is that you want yet.
Mm-hmm.
So try something
Mm-hmm.
and experience it. Let me give you an example. When I was growing up, uh, I had chores and I did different jobs growing up. One of my chores was taking out the trash. From early on, I hated it. And
Me
in the
too.
back of my mind, right, in the back
Yeah.
of my mind, I was like, I know for certain I have no desire to be a trash man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just don't want to do it. I had to take it out of my house like every week, and it was like, or multiple times a week because we're a big family. And it was like, definitely not for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had to mow the lawn. I quickly realized I like being outside. I just don't have a desire to be a lawn maintenance person.
Mm-hmm.
I can do it. It's a skill set. By the way, it's still a skill set that I possess.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm making a choice, it's not the one that I want.
Mm-hmm.
My
Like you could
father,
be good at something, but
right,
doesn't mean you want to do it.
right, exactly. And that's this next part. My dad had a construction company, and uh, it's sunny and humid here, very humid
Yeah.
in the summers, and there's mosquitoes, which is when I would go to work with him. And we would be at the job site at 6 a.m., the latest. And this is like, we would go and we would train in the morning and then go and be at the job site by 6 in the morning.
Wow.
And this was rough work. You had to dig trenches. My dad had this thing that he wanted the job site impeccable. So I was constantly sweeping the job site, stacking wood, taking trash, throwing it out. Like, there was nothing, like, it was an impeccable job site. And I realized I know how to do this. In fact, I can go and be a foreman in any like residential job site. I could do that right now, but I have no desire.
Mm.
It's a skill set that I have. I built a certain work ethic, getting up early, doing the hard labor, so I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that I didn't want, like, I felt like that's not what I was put on this earth to do.
Mm-hmm.
When I started working with people in the performance perspective, because that's what I thought I was going to be when I started. I thought I was going to be a performance coach. I started realizing, wow, this is amazing. I could do this. And then I realized, wait, but there's more to this.
Mm.
Not just the training component, but there's a nutrition component. Oh, let me learn more about that.
Mm.
And I realized, wait, it's not one or the other. It's a combination, because we're not a machine. We're like, all of this is intertwined. And then I realized, wait, we get injured when we're trying to push the limits.
Mm.
And a lot of times, how can we prevent it? So I started studying and I did physical therapy. And then I realized, wait, none of this matters, is the stuff between our heads is in the wrong place. So I started looking into the neuroscience and the mindset and all that stuff.
Mm.
And then I looked deeper into that, and I started understanding, wait, there's something deeper that's called brain set, and it's understanding the different brains and how does each one of those operate so that I can achieve mindset, so that then I can perform, so that then I can do all this other stuff without having to feel motivated, but really coming from a place of inspiration. Okay, great. So now I'm like, wait, this is what I was put on this earth to do. This is what I was put on this earth to be able to serve people, to optimize the way they show up in their day.
Mm-hmm.
And then that got extended even further when I started working with other men like myself, that it was even that much more hyper focused. And I was like, oh, wait, now there's something greater than even just personal performance. It's, how does that impact? How's the trickle effect? How does the legacy spill over onto the people that matter most in our life?
Man, I have to write more of this down.
Good thing it's
I love
recorded,
it.
right?
I know. I love everything you're saying. I mean, I couldn't agree with it more. Like it's looking back, like I have so much to learn. Like I don't, and that's again why I love this podcast is because like you learn so much from different people. And what you just said about you figured out what you didn't want to do, like that I almost did the same thing, but I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and we both ended up with the same result. We both, I tried
Right.
something, I was like, yeah, I could be okay at it or good at it, but I don't like it. I don't like
Right.
administrative things are not my thing, not my favorite thing. Okay, sales. Like, yeah, I'm decent at it. I can talk to people. I like the interaction with people, but I wasn't gifted at it. I didn't like that dynamic, right? But then I found out, oh, okay, creativity, like making stuff. Like I always loved doing that and discovering that. So we both figured out and have this experience under my belt that benefited me. Like I believe my sales experience is benefiting me from my podcasting, my confidence, the way I talk. Everything came from those experiences, and if I didn't go through it, I may not be here today. And so it's all plays into what you have to offer. And
Right.
so I love what you just said, and that's why I was asking that question, what your thoughts are, because that's the question I get a lot. It's like, how did you within like a couple years, you went from I known you as a sales guy, now you're the content creator guy. How did that happen? Like, what did you do? And so I love what you said about try to figure out what you don't want, the
Right.
garbage, the foreman, the hard labor.
Right.
And I don't like that either. So and
Right.
either of those.
Right. Sometimes you already know what it is. Sometimes you already know what it is, but you don't have the courage to pursue it yet. Right. So if you find and you know what it is, okay, great. Maybe, and again, this is where understanding the rationale and
Mhm.
being okay with it, like there's a lot of people that say, hey, burn all the bridges and go for it right away. If you're working at a 9 to 5, quit your job and go do what you're passionate about. Okay, wait. Maybe if you're single, but if you got to pay bills and you're supporting a family and kids, is that the best thing? And then your personality. Are
Mhm.
you the type of person that thrives on being pushed to the edge? Some people break down, and that's okay. So don't burn all your bridges right
Mhm.
from the beginning, because all it's going to send you is to reptile brain.
Mhm.
And then now you can't operate because you're drowning,
Mhm.
right? I'll give you another example. If you're drowning in the water, is that the time for me sitting on a boat, dry, not drowning, to try to teach you how to swim? Oh,
Please
just
no.
right. What needs to happen? I
Yeah.
throw you the life preserver, grab the life preserver, bring you in, make sure you're safe.
Mhm.
Now we can have a conversation. Not that day, because you're probably shaken up, you almost died.
Mhm.
Probably not the day to have it right there. So
Mhm.
we say, hey, you know that you like being around water. You know that you like the water. How about we learn how to swim?
Mhm.
We'll start where shallow, where you can be, and we'll just practice going underwater a little bit at a time, just so
Mhm.
you feel confident going underwater and being completely immersed. You think you can do that? Oh, that I can do.
Mhm.
I'm not going to throw you in the middle of the ocean the first day, because you're going to freak out,
Yeah.
right? So we take the baby steps, but we have to get you to safety before we start teaching you that process, because you're not going to learn and absorb something when you're surviving. That's not when you're learning something,
Yeah.
right?
That advice, like I was lucky because I was in that state where, when I started, I didn't have that much responsibility. I had, my rent was very low, didn't have no mortgage payment, no nothing big like that. So I could take a bigger risk. So I
Right.
did take that advice and just did it. And I did it within, it was only 6 months where I was like kind of stressed about, where money's going to come in, financial means, but that was my kind of motivator. I was like, I want to make this work. I want to make this happen. And that works for me. But what works for me may not work
Right.
for you or the next
Right.
person. The next person is not black and white, it's gray. And it depends, like you said, if you're single, all these factors, single, age, experience, knowledge. And that's what I just try to tell people, like, people who are losing their jobs and who are okay to take risk. For like my younger sister, she unfortunately got laid off, but she's lucky. She gets to live at home and not rent free, but pretty inexpensive, and gets to have food on the table, and those things are taken care of. And I'm trying to help her and understand, like, this is a good time for you to figure out your vision, figure out when the world is slowing down,
Right.
and you have that moment to take a breath and think and get clarity, like you said. This is the time, because I find life is moves so fast, so quick. Like, if you're not on it, sometimes you feel like you miss the opportunity.
Right.
But now, at least in my opinion, this is the opportunity if you can, right? And I get it. Some people have a mortgage, have 3 kids, have a wife, and have all these responsibilities, and you don't have the luxury
Right.
of doing that. And so the advice is different and tailored differently. So I love what you said. Maybe my last question, because we're coming up to the hour mark. I want to respect your time if you have time.
Yeah.
So we talked a lot about, again, what can people do during this time to figure out their vision, figure out what they want to do, and the advice is not black and white. It just depends, right? What are some of the maybe resources, like if I got laid off and I'm stuck and I need to figure out what's next in the game, where would you say in today's day and age, would you say, find someone to follow and learn from them? Would you say, like, have, like you said, deep meditation and write down all the details of everything you don't like? Is there any steps you would, I guess, recommend them to take in order to discover their vision, what drives them, and how to take action?
Right. If you find yourself, just because of the time that we find ourselves in now with this global pandemic, and there are lots of people being laid off. So let's say you're one of those people that got laid off. If you're a person that wasn't doing what you felt like you were supposed to be doing, this could be an opportunity for you to revisit what it is that perhaps you perhaps want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to happen, but at the very least, you have a little bit of space to think about it. That's one. Now, understand, if you got bills, you got responsibilities, you need to find something that will help cover and get you moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
I for a long time, I used to be of the thought where, like, hey, go after your passion and do it. I'm kind of an extreme guy in some of the ways that I do things, because they're for me. This is the way they work. Like when I was doing when I was writing my book, I had kept pushing off the book for a while to finish writing it. And I was reading this book called Resisting Happiness. And on page 3, the author, who's written I don't know how many different books, he says, people come to me all the time and say, I would like for you to publish my book, because he has a publishing company as well. And he goes, okay, great. Finish writing the script and then bring it to me. He goes, and I never hear back from them again. And I remember reading, this is page 3 in that book, and I put the book down and I said, I have to do something different, because I'm not going to be one of those people. It's not that I was going to have him publish it.
Yeah.
So I took out $100 in my wallet. I had 5 20s. I put it out. I took a picture and I posted it on Facebook. I said, I need your help. I said, I'm going to give $100 to everyone that comments below if by, it was like 10 days from that post, I don't have my first draft into my editor. And by the end of the day, there were so many comments. Most of the times it was just people saying, hey, I don't need your money. I know you can do. It was more support than anything.
Yeah.
But if I added up the tally of all the comments in there, I was in the hole for $9,000. Okay.
So you created accountability. You don't want to be out of the hole for
Right.
$9,000. That's
right.
That's really
well. I knew what I was getting into because I know the way I operate. But my wife wasn't happy about it. My dad wasn't happy about it. My family was like, what are you doing? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
And by the way, in that 10-day span, it was in the middle of our family vacation. So I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
So I didn't take away from the family. What I would do is I wake up super early. I
Mm-hmm.
would write, and then when everybody would go to sleep, I would write some more.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got it done in the mountains, and I had to drive down into the city because we were in a place with no reception, to send it to the editor. And I did it the day before, and I
Wow.
sent that. I sent it there. I got it done. I didn't have to pay anybody, which was great. I share that because you need to know the way you operate
Mm-hmm.
and be okay with it. Um, I was alluding to, a lot of times people are like, "Oh, go follow your passion."
Yeah.
What I found is you're going to do yourself a disservice is if you're struggling to eat and you're just trying to change your passion. What happens is oftentimes you start diluting it and start, what's the word? You start accepting less than really what you really want. In
Mm-hmm.
other words, if you're creating this and what you really want is to create this masterpiece, you'll settle for something way diluted. And what that starts doing is that it now doesn't project your real self to the world, and now
Mm-hmm.
it's a diluted version of yourself. You're better off find something that's going to pay the bills,
Yeah.
and then kind of like how you're doing this on the side, this podcast. Oh, I have this covered. Let me do this with the time that I have, build it up organically so I never find myself diluting what I really love.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my recommendation, if you find yourself in this spot, find a way to stop the bleeding real quick. Find something that you, number one, that you can get, and number two, that will stop the bleeding. Make sure you can kind of pay the bills, but don't forget about the thing
Mm-hmm.
that you really want.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget about that, because there's nothing wrong with doing something you dislike.
Mm-hmm.
There is something sad about staying there and
Mm-hmm.
never transitioning.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it for 5 years, even 10 years, but with an intention and a plan to shift out of it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
100%. And like comes back to how you work. For me, creating the accountability was what made me be more disciplined. And that was the advice given to me, that he said that accountability is the laziness vaccine. I thought that was clever. But it does. It resonate with me because I wanted so many things. I wanted this idea of success, but never was driven enough to do it. And having that accountability, I did something similar to you. I posted online to tell everyone I accepted this creative challenge where I was going to create video every single day. And if you're in the video editing world, you know how much time that takes. It's very difficult. It took, same thing, woke up an hour earlier so I could edit videos that morning, and then on my lunch breaks, and then after work. And it was a month, and it was crazy. I've never worked so hard in my life, I think. But it was the coolest experience, to your point, of creating that, that $100 and post, like, I got to do this. And I'm similar, like you. I'm like, okay, I wanted this done, I'm going to get it done.
Right.
But you're right. It's so about understanding, I guess it's self-awareness, understanding who you are and how you work. Are you a family? Do you have a family? Okay. So this is what you need to take. You need to take the hour when your kids go to bed and focus on your passion, and then your 9 to 5 on providing for your family. And then if you're single and you have the opportunity to do that, and you can take that risk, why not
Yeah.
go for it, right? If
Yeah.
you can. And it's all dependent, right?
And
So
if you're a creative, like writing, video, pictures, anything in the creative space, one of the questions that I have is, are you creating? Like, I talk to so many people who are like, oh yeah, I'm a writer, or I love art and stuff like that. Okay, when was the last thing that you did? Oh, like a few months ago. You need to be doing that like every day,
mhm.
something every single day. I'll give you an example. My son is 11 years old, and uh, we've created a plan for him to be consistent. And he decided what were the things he wanted to be consistent with. One of them is origami. He really loves origami. And he's somewhere now, like probably like 120 or 130 days straight without missing a day of creating a piece of origami. What was fascinating was the first, I think it was like the first like 60 or 70 days, he would just kind of follow and start doing the origami that was in, he would just look at a book, he would look at a video, and he would do that. Something happened around day 80 that he started designing his own origami. He had created enough understanding and manipulation that now he started creating his own designs. And because he had understood the dynamic of it, because of his consistency every day, he now started saying, wait, I can take components of this, components of that, components of that, to now start designing and creating this image. Like one of the ones he's working on is a phoenix, like the bird, a phoenix.
My God.
And at first he did one that was kind of like just wings and a tail. Then he decided that he wanted to make one with talons and so forth within the thing. This is, I don't know if you're familiar with origami, but it's just one piece of paper. There's no cuts. There's no gluing.
I can imagine. I'm wondering how the heck he's doing that. Like,
right. So he's 11.
Yeah.
So he starts understanding how to manipulate it, but that didn't happen. He was interested in it before, but he was never doing that before. But after like 60 or 70 days of consistently doing that, there's something that happened that now would allow him a deeper understanding to start creating. So if you're a creative, specifically if you're a creative, find ways to create every single day. Every single day. Even if it's a little. Make it something that's doable. Like for him, it was do an origami design every day. But what started happening is that some of them were really in depth. And it could take an entire day. So it wasn't feasible. So then we had to break it down as like, okay, at least 10 steps need to be completed every single day. So some days he completes an entire thing. Some days there are pieces of one, right?
So he's improving every day.
Right. And you're working on it. I started doing that right now with some drawing. I don't know why, but I chose a wolf. So I decided that I'm going to draw a wolf every day for a year. I'm on day 66 today. And the first month, I was like all over the place. Like this last month, it was like my hand knew the anatomy a lot better. I can start manipulating it a little bit more. It's not perfect. Anybody who's a real artist will look at it and be like, that's pretty sucky. But I have noticed my progression, and I'm excited to look forward towards it because now I feel like I'm having more control as it goes. So if you're a creative, create every single day, even something small,
I love that. Armando, thank you so much. This was such a cool, interesting conversation. I know I learned a lot from talking to you, and I appreciate you giving me your time. Is there any final thoughts you want to say before we kind of sign off, and maybe at the end of it, let people know where they can find you?
Sure. Stay curious. I would say that's one thing. If you're curious about life, about possibility, there's nothing that'll stop you because there's always something else to look around. There's another corner to peek your head around, another thing to look under, just to kind of explore. If you can maintain that childlike curiosity, you can go quite far. As far as where to find me, if you're interested in taking a look at the book, go to legacycodebook.com. If you're somebody who's been suffering with chronic pain for more than a year, you've seen other therapists or health professionals and you still have pain and you want to eliminate it, I would say go to Cruz, C-R-U-Z, country.com. And on there, we have a presentation that walks you through the 6 components that create pain and optimize health. And it's something free for you to kind of go through, start getting educated on, so you have a better understanding of how to take charge of your life again.
Awesome. I'll put all of Armando's contact information I just said in the description as well, so you can get those links right away. Armando, thank you so much. This is the Making It podcast. Again, I'm your host, Kyler Miles, and thank you. And we are signing off.